Hello, great people. The news of the death of Nigeria's Chief of Army Staff, Tarid Lagbaja, took many by surprise. The man was fit, ill and healthy. Then he fell sick, and all of a sudden, people just got the news that he died. But what Nigerians don't know is that Tarid Lagbaja is not the first Chief of Army Staff that would die in office. There have been instances whereby Chief of Army Staff died under mysterious circumstance in Nigeria, and that is what we'll be discussing in this video. The circumstance that led to their death, the mystery behind it, I will be discussing that with you. And to discuss that, we'll be employing some form of knowledge of history, mathematics, politics, political economy, international relations, and diplomacy. We'll be employing all that and a whole lot more on this episode of Politing with Dr. Omosoladeji. Now, the first Chief of Army Staff that died in office in Nigeria dates back to 1967 by the name Joseph Akahan. Joseph Akahan was appointed shortly before the Nigerian Civil War. And one thing about Joseph Akahan was that as at that time, he was 30 years old. Now imagine that you have a Chief of Army Staff that is just 30 years of age. So you can see that Nigerian leaders, they are being wicked because some of the people that were there since times immemorial are still the one ruling us now. When Joseph Akahan was the Chief of Army Staff and he was 30 years old, it's not that he doesn't have people that are older than him. Get my point? As at that time when Joseph Akahan was 30 years old, there are people in the Nigerian population that are 50, 60, 70, 80. There are people that are way older than Joseph Akahan. There are people that are way older than Yakubu Gowon when he got hold of the country's leadership at a very young age. So if the older generation as at that time could give them the opportunity to lead, so why is it that Nigerian leaders find it difficult to give the younger generations now to lead? They want to perpetuate themselves in office. Now, that's by the way. Joseph Akahan, the 30-year-old Chief of Army Staff, died in helicopter crash. Now, how did it happen? It happened strangely because Joseph Akahan he visited the front lines in Isuka, like the battlefront. And after that, he returned to his hometown in Doko for a brief rest. Like he tried to go to his hometown to relax and rest a bit. Now, as he was heading back to Makurdi, the helicopter carrying him crashed, claiming his life along with 2 pilots on board. So that means that Joseph Akahan, with the pilot on board, perished. That was the first instance of Chief of Army Staff that died in office. Now, the second one happened in 2001, not long ago. That is the one of Attahiru Ibrahim. You remember Tukur Buratai? Buratai served 6 years under Buhari. So when there were too much clamor that Buratai should leave, that the security situation in Nigeria is not improving, so there was so much human rights abuse. You remember the EndSARS massacre in 2020. So there were a lot of displacement against Tukur Buratai at that time. So after much agitation, President Buhari, as he then was, removed Buratai. So Attahiru Ibrahim was brought in. So while Attahiru Ibrahim was on an assignment from Abuja to Kaduna, his helicopter crashed and 10 people were killed on board. Now, the problem is that the helicopter crashed under some kind of mysterious circumstances. Like an helicopter carrying the Chief of Army Staff just crashed and perished like that. There are conspiracy theories as regards the death of that man. But what the army and the media reported was that the helicopter crashed. Some are suggesting that maybe perhaps it was shot down or something, but what was reported officially was that it crashed and it killed 10 people on board. Now, the third one is the one that Nigeria is facing currently, which is that of Tarid Lagbaja. It occurred on November 5, 2024. Now, the one of Akahan was involving an helicopter. The one of Attahiru Ibrahim involved an helicopter. But this one of Tarid Lagbaja seems to be different. He was sick, reportedly of cancer, and before you can say Jesus is Lord, it's gone. But then people are saying that, oh, maybe he was poisoned while in office. Maybe, some people just want him out of the job. And I have said that you couldn't have poisoned a chief of army staff, because it's not that he was just brought in as a chief of army staff. He's been a military guy all his life. He has witnessed military leadership since when he was commissioned as an officer into the Nigerian army. So I believe that being a chief of army staff, he couldn't have loose guard anyhow. And if he had loose guard anyhow, definitely he will be regretting in heaven now that, oh, had I know that, I had not loose guard, because it's not easy to poison a chief of army staff, because he has all the he has all the power and paraphernalia of office to protect himself. So if truly, or if some people successfully poison him, then that means that the man lose guard. But what we heard was he was terribly sick, very, very sick, and the end of everyone, he died in office. He was appointed in June 2023, and he died on November 5, 2024. But from the media report so far, Lagbaja is a good guy, and may his soul rest in peace. Now, this three chief of army staff that died in office, what lesson can we learn from their death as a country? Because I believe there are some important lessons to learn. Now, three chief of army staff has died in office. 2 died via helicopter crash. 1 died via ill health. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us that we need to begin to focus on the Nigerian Air Force and the General Engineering Department in Nigerian Army. Because if an accident involving helicopters could have taken 2 of your chief of army staff in the history of Nigeria, that means that the operation of the Nigerian Air Force and the whole engineering department of Nigerian Army needs to be looked into. You remember that lady, that Nigerian young lady that died through, I think an accident at the barrack. I'm trying to remember her name now. That young lady, that Yoruba lady. Now, that was also some form of accident. So you can see that the whole engineering department of the Nigerian Army needs to be given so much attention in such a way that the accident will be reduced. The maintenance of military gadgets, helicopter, and other facilities needs to be thoroughly looked into. And now, another thing that we need to look at from the death of this 3 chief of army staff is that medical facilities in the military needs to improve. Why do I say that? For helicopter crash, the relevance of medical facility might not show that much, because imagine if an helicopter crash, the person is as good as gone, right? But then for that of Lagbaja, the top chief of army staff that died in office, it shows that the medical facilities in the military needs to improve, because if Lagbaja had been taken to a very good hospital within Nigeria, if Nigeria has credible medical facilities like that of the US, UK, Canada, Germany, and the rest of the developed world, perhaps Lagbaja wouldn't have died. Now, another thing apart from improving the medical facilities is that in the Nigerian Army, perhaps for officers that are above 50 years, their tests should not be annually, but perhaps biannually. In the sense that I think yearly test, it's not right for officers that are above 50, because the life expectancy in Nigeria is about 50-51. So if the life expectancy, that means how long you are expected to live as a Nigerian, is between 50-51, then if you are a military officer and you've clocked 50, by virtue of the nature of your job, which is a rigorous work, that means that the test should come more rapidly. So instead of once a year, as it is being done in the military, I think that it should be twice a year. Because let's imagine that if Lagbaja had done his annual medical checkup in January, and maybe cancer developed in his body in February. So that means that he won't know until he goes for another checkup in January. That's like 11 months distance. By that time, the cancer would have definitely wreaked a lot of havoc. So I think that for officers that are over 50 years, their medical checkup should be biannual, which is 2 times a year or even quarterly. So that will give them, that will make it like 3 times a year. Another thing is that the test that is being conducted in the military, which also relate to the medical facilities, is it comprehensive? Because the military is not isolated from the general inefficiency that we have in Nigeria. So is it that they will just test their blood pressure, they will just, test their sugar level, heartbeat and all that? Is it comprehensive test that is being done for those officers in the Nigerian military? Because that is only where some major diseases can be detected. So I think that the test in the Nigerian military should be more comprehensive and elaborate. I mean, it takes a lot to be chief of army staff, to rise through the ranks. So imagine you having a chief of army staff and the man just, died just like that. If the man is well loved by his officers, it can even lead to demoralization within the Nigerian army. So we need to kind of like look into all that. Where I wish Lagbaja eternal rest, and I pray that God will grant his family the fortitude to bear the loss. But then Nigerian army should begin to kind of like learn from history, in the sense that you've lost 3 chief of army staff. We need to look at the circumstance behind their death and begin to take action so that such won't happen to any other chief of army staff or any military officer at that. Then the front lines as well needs to be checked in terms of those that are leading the soldiers into battle against Boko Haram, bandits, murderous S-men and all that. What is the kind of welfare that is being given to them? Because I believe that if we can increase the salary of judges by over 300%, I think the military, the police, the DSS, they also need and deserve an increment in their salary. And not just, the security agencies, lecturers as well, teachers, in fact, medical doctors, everyone is important because they are contributing their best to national development. It's been an interesting time with you on this episode of Politic with Dr. Omoshola. The doctor is a political scientist with a PhD in political science, and this is where we relax. This is where we talk about politics and happenings in the polity. Do want to subscribe, do want to turn on your notification button, and of course, I've got great interesting videos coming your way. Also catch up with my past videos. Till I see you again, I'm just around the corner, and of course you already know that I love you all sincerely.